Imagine being told your dream is impossible, that the world isn't ready for your ideas. Now, imagine proving everyone wrong, and not just changing your life, but changing history itself.
Another moment, Doctor.
In
Are you quite
1911,
sure of this?
Charles
As sure as I
Kettering,
can be, General.
a nearly
The future
blind
of
school
warfare
teacher
starts
from
now.
Ohio, invented something so revolutionary, so mind-bending, that even the most brilliant minds of his time laughed in his face. They mocked him, they rejected him, but he didn't stop. What started as a tiny spark of an idea, the electric starter, became the technology that changed how we drive, how we live, and how we fight. But Kettering didn't stop there. He didn't just build machines. He built the future. In the midst of war, he created a weapon so advanced, it scared even the military. A flying bomb that could strike targets without a pilot. The Bug, a machine that failed miserably at first, but held the key to the future of warfare. This is the story of Charles Kettering, the inventor no one believed in, the genius who saw what others couldn't, and the man who shaped the world we live in today. His innovations didn't just survive, they changed everything forever. In the dusty farmlands of Ohio, a near-blind schoolteacher named Charles Kettering was told he'd never be an engineer. His eyes were failing, his dreams fading. Yet the same man who once strung telephone wires across empty fields would soon build a device that changed the world. In 1911, working out of a dim barn with little more than stubborn hope, Kettering built what experts called impossible, the world's first practical electric starter. It ended the deadly hand-crank era overnight, saving thousands from broken arms, shattered jaws, and fiery explosions. Within a year, every luxury car maker wanted it. Within a decade, it transformed transportation forever. But that was only the beginning. When World War I erupted, the U.S. Army handed this quiet inventor an unthinkable challenge to build an airplane that could fly and kill without a pilot. Out of cardboard, wood, and pure imagination, Kettering created the Bug, the world's first cruise missile. A flying bomb guided by gyroscopes decades before computers existed. It launched perfectly, soared through the Ohio sky, then plunged into the earth. Generals laughed. The project was buried, classified, forgotten until 25 years later, when the world went to war again, and the same technology resurfaced as the blueprint for every missile and drone that would follow. The teacher they once mocked had unknowingly built the weapon of the future. From a farm boy who couldn't see to the man who saw further than anyone else, Kettering proved one truth. Being too far ahead of your time isn't failure. It's prophecy. When the engines of war thundered across Europe in 1917, the U.S. military turned to an unlikely savior, not a general, not a soldier, but a soft-spoken inventor from Ohio who had once been nearly blind and broke. Charles Kettering, the same man who ended the deadly hand-crank era of automobiles, was now asked to do the impossible. Build a flying bomb that could find its target without a pilot. Working in secret barns lit by flickering lamps, he crafted a crude biplane of cardboard and wood, powered by a modest engine and guided by a clockwork brain of gears, gyroscopes, and barometers. They called it the bug. It looked like a toy until it roared down its launch rail and leapt into the sky. For a few electric seconds, the crowd of officers believed they were witnessing the birth of a miracle. Then the bug tilted, screamed, and plunged into the ground, exploding in dust and splinters. Generals who had come to judge technical failure instead found themselves ducking and laughing nervously as errant prototypes chased them across the field. But Kettering didn't scowl or storm off. He took notes, tweaked the mechanism, and tried again. The failures taught more than the successes ever could. Though the military shelved the project as unreliable and too risky to deploy, those hidden blueprints, the gears, the barometric tricks, the idea of an unmanned preset flying weapon would not die. 2 decades later, as the world convulsed again in global war, engineers dusted off the bug's secrets, adapted its core lessons with better gyros and radios, and built weapons that would terrorize cities and change how wars were fought. The teacher they once mocked had drawn the first line of a new chapter in warfare, and history would eventually read it. By 1918, as the Great War neared its bloody end, Charles Kettering's bug sat poised to change warfare forever. An unmanned biplane that could strike targets miles away without risking a single pilot's life. It had flown. It had crashed. It had terrified generals. It had proven that flight and automation could merge into one lethal creation. Yet before it could reach the battlefield, the war ended, and the bug was buried, not destroyed, but classified. Every plan, every drawing, every test report was sealed away inside government vaults, erased from public record. Newspapers never mentioned it. Historians didn't know it existed. For 20 years, it became a phantom invention, too advanced for its time, too dangerous for an army still learning to trust airplanes with men inside them, let alone machines that flew alone. While America celebrated victory, the bug slept, its cardboard wings folded in crates, its mechanical heart silent. And the man who built it moved on, pouring his restless mind into cars, engines, fuels, and new technologies that shaped daily life. But the world was changing again. In the 1930 seconds, as dictators rose and new wars brewed, military engineers began reopening dusty archives, searching for forgotten ideas that might save them in the next conflict. Deep in those files they found it, the Kettering bug, the unmanned ghost of 1917. Its blueprints still sharp, its logic still sound. The machine, once dismissed as a curiosity, was now recognized as a prophecy. What Kettering had created with wood and wire had quietly predicted the next age of warfare, the age of guided weapons. And as the world marched toward another war, the forgotten bug would rise again from its sealed coffin, ready to show the world that it had never really died. It had just, by 1940, the world was burning again, Europe in ruins, London under siege, and America preparing for the inevitable. In Washington, desperate for innovation, military planners dusted off old blueprints from forgotten projects, and there, buried under 2 decades of silence, they found Charles Kettering's bug. What the generals of 1918 had dismissed as unreliable now looked like a miracle waiting to be reborn. The logic of the design, An unmanned aircraft carrying explosives, flying a preset course guided by gyroscopes, was suddenly modern. With better engines, precise barometers, and new radio control systems, the impossible had become achievable. And in that rediscovery, the bug was no longer just a relic. It was the ancestor of every guided missile the world was about to unleash. While Kettering himself led the National Inventors Council under President Roosevelt, recruiting America's greatest minds to arm democracy, his long-forgotten idea was quietly shaping the future of warfare. Across the Atlantic, Nazi Germany introduced the V-1 flying bomb, a pilotless weapon that screamed across the sky before crashing into London, the same deadly principle Kettering had envisioned in 1917. American engineers responded with their own version, radio-guided assault drones, and the interstate TDR-1, direct descendants of the bug's design. The concept that had once caused generals to laugh was now raining fire upon cities, and somewhere in Ohio, the old inventor watched history come full circle. The weapon he built to end war had returned perfected, mechanized, unstoppable. The cardboard ghost he created in a barn had become the metallic scream of the modern battlefield. The future he saw too early had finally arrived, and it was terrifyingly real. He's been waiting for the world to catch up. By the mid-1940s, Charles Kettering was no longer the young dreamer tinkering in barns. He was one of America's most celebrated inventors, the mind behind the electric starter, the fuel that powered modern engines, and the industrial systems that turned machines into everyday miracles. Yet beneath the applause, one truth haunted him. The world had finally embraced the invention it once laughed at, but not in the way he'd hoped. The Kettering bug, his unmanned flying bomb once buried in secrecy, had become the ancestor of every cruise missile and combat drone shaping the new face of war. Its principle, a self-guided machine delivering destruction without a pilot, had moved from dusty sketches to deadly skies. As nations raced to refine it, Kettering turned away from weapons and toward life itself. He began asking different questions. How could engineering heal instead of harm? Could the same precision that guided bombs be used to save lives? These questions drove him into medicine and energy research. He designed machines to treat disease, incubators to protect premature infants, and systems that laid groundwork for modern MRI technology. While generals perfected killing from afar, the man who had made it possible searched for ways to give life back. But the irony was inescapable. The same mind that birthed convenience in peacetime had also birthed terror in war. To most, Kettering was a hero of innovation. To himself, he was a reminder that every invention carries two futures, the one we dream of and the one we unleash. And though he never sought fame or revenge, history would remember him not just as the man who made machines work, but as the man who made the world ask whether progress was worth its price. By 1947, the world Kettering had helped create was racing faster than ever. Cars roaring across highways, planes crossing oceans, cities pulsing with light. The inventions that had once seemed impossible were now ordinary, yet the man behind them refused to stop. Charles Kettering, at 71, retired from General Motors only in title. In truth, he was already chasing a new frontier, the mystery of life itself. He believed that if humanity could understand how plants turn sunlight into energy, it could solve the world's future energy crisis. The real secret, he said, is in the leaves. While others saw retirement, he saw a laboratory waiting to be built. And so, he founded the Kettering Foundation, pouring his fortune into research on photosynthesis, magnetism, and medicine. He invented a hypertherm device to treat infection, designed new incubators for premature babies, and helped establish what would become the Sloan Kettering Institute for Cancer Research, a place where industry's precision met medicine's compassion. The man once called the Wizard of the Motor had turned his engineering genius towards saving lives instead of powering machines. Yet in private, he spoke softly of the bug, not with pride, but with reflection. Being ahead of your time, he told a friend, means the world isn't ready for you yet. He had learned that lesson in the laughter of generals and in the quiet hum of engines that would one day carry bombs farther than he'd ever imagined. Still, he never looked back. My interest, he would say, is in the future, because I'm going to spend the rest of my life there. In the twilight of his years, Kettering became something rarer than an inventor. He became a philosopher of progress, a man who understood that true genius isn't just creating what works, but foreseeing what the world will need and daring to build it long before it believes. By the early 1952, Charles Kettering had become a living legend, a man whose inventions powered a nation and whose ideas had reshaped the modern world. But behind the applause, he carried the quiet burden of a man who had seen the double edge of progress. His electric starter had ended the danger of hand cranking, but now the same engines roared through battlefields. His chemical breakthroughs powered transportation, but they also choked the skies. His unmanned aircraft, once dismissed as fantasy, had evolved into guided missiles that darkened the world's conscience. For the first time in his life, Kettering began to ask not, can we build it, but should we? He realized that invention wasn't just about imagination, it was about responsibility. When reporters called him the father of modern automation, he smiled faintly and said, machines can lighten labor, but they should never replace the mind that built them. In his final years, he became less an engineer and more a philosopher, teaching young inventors that true genius lies not in the spark of creation, but in the wisdom to use it well. He would often walk through his laboratory, touching the machines that had defined his life, whispering that progress must serve people, not the other way around. And though his eyes had once failed him, he now saw clearer than ever. Invention is only as noble as the heart that guides it. For Charles Kettering, the world had finally caught up, but it was up to the next generation to decide where it would go next. On a cold November morning in 1958, the world quietly lost one of its greatest inventors. Charles Franklin Kettering, the farm boy who once squinted through failing eyes to read his textbooks, passed away at his home in Dayton, Ohio. But while the man was gone, his world was still running quite literally on his imagination. Every car that started with a turn of a key, every engine that powered a city, every drone that patrolled the skies carried a fragment of his genius. What had begun in a dusty barn with cardboard wings and flickering lamps had become the very foundation of the modern age. His Kettering bug, once ridiculed and buried in classified archives, had evolved into the guided missiles and unmanned aircraft that defined global warfare. His electric starter had brought mobility to millions. His medical innovations saved lives daily. Even the institutions he built, the Sloan Kettering Cancer Center and the Kettering Foundation, continued his mission to make science serve humanity. Yet perhaps his greatest invention was not mechanical at all. It was the idea of persistence itself. He proved that failure is never the end, only unfinished progress. He taught that invention isn't born from genius, but from grit, from refusing to stop when the world says no. A century later, his words still echo through every laboratory, every cockpit, every spark of innovation. My interest is in the future, because that's where I'm going to spend the rest of my life. And though his bug fell from the sky, the dream behind it never crashed. It kept flying through time itself, carrying the unmistakable signature of the man who built the future before the world was ready for it. Decades after Charles Kettering's death, the world he dreamed of had fully arrived, a world powered by automation, electricity, and imagination. Jet engines roared across oceans, cars started with a whisper, and machines spoke the language of precision he had written half a century before. Every drone in the sky, every guided missile, every ignition spark carried the DNA of his thinking. In classrooms, students studied him as the man who electrified the modern age. But few realized how human his journey truly was. A half-blind farm boy who refused to quit, a teacher who wired telephones, an inventor who changed how mankind moved, fought, and healed. Even as the technologies he birthed became commonplace, his deeper message endured. Progress without purpose is chaos. At the Kettering University in Michigan, founded in his honor, young engineers still learn by doing, failing, rebuilding, and trying again, just as he did in that dim barn in Dayton. Hospitals still carry his name, saving lives through research he set in motion. Every hum of an engine, every quiet hospital monitor, every launch from a runway is a whisper of his legacy, proof that persistence can outlive the man himself. The bug, the machine that once flew for seconds, now soars as satellites, autonomous vehicles, and spacecraft, humanity's new wings built from his old dream. Kettering once said, "If you have always done it that way, it is probably wrong." Those words became the creed of innovation itself. The boy who couldn't see the chalkboard ended up teaching the world how to see the future and to never, ever stop inventing it. More than a century after Charles Kettering's first crude bug took its doomed flight, its spirit still circles above us, reborn in every satellite, missile, drone, and autonomous machine that defines the 21st century. What once seemed like a dream drawn in pencil on the back of an envelope has become the backbone of modern innovation. Yet the true legacy of Charles Franklin Kettering isn't metal, fuel, or circuitry, it's the mindset he left behind. He taught that invention is not magic but perseverance, that every failure is a rehearsal for success, that the future belongs to those who build what doesn't yet exist. His electric starter transformed how we move. His bug transformed how we fight. and his research foundations transformed how we heal. But his greatest creation was a blueprint for human progress. From the roar of an engine to the silence of a hospital ward, from the hum of an electric car to the steady flight of a drone, his influence endures like an unseen current powering civilization itself. The world finally caught up to him and is still catching up. The boy who once gazed across Ohio's farmlands, wondering how things worked, ended up teaching all of us why they must. The bug may have crashed in 1918, but the idea behind it, the refusal to stop imagining, never touched the ground again. In the digital age, long after Charles Kettering's tools have rusted and his laboratories have fallen silent, the pulse of his imagination still beats inside the world's machines. Every start button, every electric motor, every self-driving car is a descendant of his stubborn genius. The bug, once a trembling wooden craft that barely left the ground, has evolved into satellites that orbit planets, drones that map oceans, and autonomous explorers that roam Mars. The same principle that guided his hands in 1917 now guides artificial intelligence in 2025. Systems that think, correct, and fly on their own. Kettering's idea of mechanical independence has become the defining feature of modern civilization. Yet beyond the technology, his life still whispers a greater truth, that vision requires patience and that failure, properly understood, is only a delayed victory. In every innovation lab, in every garage startup, his philosophy lives on. Test, fail, refine, repeat. From NASA's laboratories to electric vehicle factories, his fingerprints are everywhere, invisible but undeniable. The teacher who once built machines by lantern light had unknowingly built the rhythm of the future. Today, more than 100 years later, his message is clearer than ever. Progress doesn't belong to those who never fail. It belongs to those who never stop trying. And because of that, the world he imagined still hums, still evolves, still soars, proof that an idea, once born in courage, can outlive its maker by centuries. More than 100 years after Charles Franklin Kettering first turned his dreams into blueprints, the world still runs on his courage. His electric starter became the heartbeat of modern mobility. His chemical innovations fueled entire industries, and his fragile cardboard bug evolved into the unmanned guardians that patrol skies today. Yet what truly survived wasn't his machines, it was his mindset, an unstoppable belief that no failure is final. From the satellites orbiting Earth to the robots exploring Mars, every leap of human progress echoes his same defiance against doubt. Kettering proved that vision is not about sight, but foresight, the ability to imagine what others can't yet see. His words, once spoken to a hall of young engineers, still ring like prophecy. You can't have progress without change, and you can't have change without trouble. That trouble, the struggle, the rejection, the crash before the flight became the universal story of innovation. Today, his name is etched not only in patents or institutions, but in the rhythm of advancement itself. Every invention that begins in failure and ends in triumph carries his spirit forward. The boy from a small Ohio farm never just built machines, he built a method, a way of thinking, an engine that never dies. And as long as humanity dares to create, Charles Kettering's invisible hand will keep turning the key to the future.